All right, I want to welcome our next speaker to the stage, Dr. Ricard Faura, and he traveled all the way from Spain, so represents a great effort to be here. He's from ICEERS, which is a fellow sister organization of Horizons and of Chacruna and of this entire movement, has been playing an important role in what people are calling these days the psychedelic ecosystem. Dr. Ricard Faura holds a Ph.D. in social psychology and a master's degree in social anthropology. He is a bridge weaver at ICEERS and associate professor at the Open University of Catalonia, where he has been teaching for 20 years. Over the past few years, he has worked together with the local and international communities for the biocultural conservation of indigenous medicines. This conservation work has focused on ayahuasca and iboga, biocultures and knowledge systems, and as well as the greater living ecosystems. In 2019, he was initiated into the Mabanzi rite of the Biwitik tradition in Gabon. He is currently an advisor to the Indigenous Medicines Conservation Fund. And the title of his presentation is Surveying the Global Iboga Landscape. Please welcome, all the way from Spain, Ricard.
Hello. Bon dia a tothom. Buenos dias. Good morning, everyone. How are you today? Are we all connected? Yes, we are, of course. Because this talk is actually about connection, about this experience that we all have, that sometimes that everything is interconnected. When we feel that we live in different worlds, but we actually also inhabit one only planet. And on this planet, everything is interrelated. It is common to hear, continuing the line and the thread of Bia and Caroline in this stage, to hear these stories in this psychedelic space about people who have this profound experience, about having this deep connection with life, with the earth, with something which is beyond themselves. It's quite possible that you've had this experience too. In any case, if there is some sort of truth in these experiences, that is, if it is true that everything is interconnected, and if it is true that psychedelic medicines can help us see that, then it could also be true that a future world where people take psychedelic medicines could have an impact on the health of our planet. However, how this impact will actually be, it's not so obvious. It is precisely this kind of questions that have been interesting me over the last few years, and that is why I have been working at ICEERS, and together with my colleague, Andrea Langlois, and also lately as an advisor of the Indigenous Medicine Conservation Fund, to better understand these issues related to the biocultural conservation of what we sometimes call indigenous medicine. And it's here when I want also to give a thank you to our friends from River Styx Foundation and Dr. Bronners for their deep connection to these concerns too, and their implication in supporting these efforts, so thank you. And well, one of the biocultural conservation processes that I have examined most closely is that of iboga, and it's biocultural. So over the past few years, I have spoken to numerous people from the international iboga and ibogaine community, and also from the local communities on the ground in Central Africa, and more precisely in Gabon. So what I will share here today anyway is my own experience and my own perspective on what I have learned about this larger ecosystems of psychedelics. So I'm not here to speak on behalf of anyone. I'm here to speak more from a sort of a suspension bridge where I can weave narratives about connections and share them with you or with anyone on these other shores of this big river. So now, let's begin with a voice from Africa. This clip is of Tata Rekako. He's a spiritual father of the Bwiti tradition in Gabon.
Oui, pour les étrangers qui s'intéressent à l'iboga, nous ne pouvons pas les refuser, nous ne pourrons que les accueillir. Parce que si l'iboga est venu, le bon Dieu l'a mis sur le sous-sol gabonais. Et nous, quand nous avons fait des recherches d'iboga, auparavant, les Occidentaux ou les étrangers ne venaient pas s'initier, consommer l'iboga. Mais les anciens avaient eu une vision en disant aux autres que plus tard, il y aurait des Européens qui viendront se faire initier, qui viendront consommer l'iboga. Alors d'autres disaient non, jamais, ça c'est quelque chose d'impossible. Vraiment les Européens là, d'autres races, pour venir consommer ce produit, ce bois sacré, c'est pas possible. Mais aujourd'hui, il y a des Européens qui viennent s'initier, il y a des étrangers qui viennent s'initier, d'autres continents d'Afrique ou Europe, et on les reçoit convenablement et on les aide à trouver leur solution s'il y en a d'autres cas. Donc nous ne pouvons pas être contre, mais nous voudrons, ce que nous souhaitons, c'est que nous devrons, que ce soit nous, les Africains, les Gabonais, que ce soit les Occidentaux, nous devrons respecter l'iboga. Nous devons respecter les consignes pour consommer l'iboga et le prendre avec mesure. Voilà, c'est ce que je souhaite, mais ils seront toujours la bienvenue pour venir découvrir les forces et les valeurs de l'iboga. Voilà, l'iboga n'initie pas le corps, il initie l'esprit. Il élève l'esprit. Donc voilà ce que je peux dire pour la fin.
Tata Rekako tells us how many years ago the elders prophesied something that was inconceivable at that time, that Europeans and other foreigners would one day be interested in their sacred medicine, le bois sacré, the sacred wood. What these elders of Central Africa probably couldn't expect at that time was the extent to which we, non-Africans, would one day seek out for these medicines, and the extent to which we, at some point, would cease to be respectful of them and aware of their ancestral practices and knowledges, and so disconnected from the original peoples and living environments that had been taking care for them for so many generations. And this disconnection has much to do with a system or a process of extraction and reduction to which we have subjected all these medicines, and that is connected to a broader system of extractivism and reductionism at a large scale. And how does it work? No? The global use of these originally indigenous medicines, sometimes in the form of their derivative alkaloids, has multiplied in the last years, and their demand has skyrocketed. And in the process of expansion of interest in these medicines, iboga, for example, has been extracted from Africa and reduced to a molecule called ibogaine, just as peyote has been reduced to mescaline, or the sacred little children to psilocybin. On the other hand, it is clear that the introduction of these medicines into the global north has really helped many people. Iboga, or ibogaine, for example, has this amazing capacity of reducing the suffering created by one of the most pressing problems affecting North America at this very moment, that is the opioid crisis and the overdose epidemic. Currently, dozens of ibogaine clinics operate all over the world, and they exist with both light and shadow. My friend here, Juliana Mulligan, will later maybe talk more about it. She's the real expert about that. But what is clear is that these centers, these clinics, have undoubtedly saved many lives and will keep saving many lives and are giving hope to many people in the US and around the world. And, well, in these places, as we can see in this image, the setting looks very clinical, very modern, we could say. But what happens to the body and to the spirit during these experiences is something that it's not yet well explained. Well, there are some theories, of course, but I think that overall we have a little idea. So, what we do know is that although Western modern societies have appropriated the process, it turns out that these medicines and their properties have been known and used for a long time by indigenous peoples. Within this original context, what happens to the body and to the spirit is very well explained, and it is part of a very old knowledge system. Actually, if you look at that and you compare it with the image before, these are the oldest psychedelic clinics in the world. Look at that. So those of us who don't come from any of these original cultures are actually very new into this niche of knowledge. We are newcomers. And we had to turn to modern science in order to try to understand a little bit about it. And that leads me to several questions. If we are newcomers and we know little about it, why have we set aside these ancient knowledge systems? Why don't we seriously consider them? And also, why don't we acknowledge the knowledge of these masters? But before diving into these questions, I will drink some water. And maybe we should also talk about the elephant in the room here. That is sourcing. Or in other words, where do the medicines we take come from? This beautiful elephant here is not just a metaphor. The forest elephant, it's not the savanna elephant, it's a little bit smaller. It is a species that only lives in the forests of Central Africa, just like the iboga. And the two of them have a very mysterious relationship. The Pygmies, who are the ones who first developed the spiritual traditions with iboga, claim in their origin stories that it was precisely the elephants who taught them about the spiritual properties of this plant. So we should not rule out that elephants and other animals might be consuming this plant for much deeper spiritual reasons that we generally attribute to our friends from the animal world. In any case, the forest elephant are now being extracted from Africa and reduced to their ivory tusks. And in the process, humans have killed 60% of them and reduced their territory to 25% of what it was in only 10 years. So yes, forest elephant is now an endangered species, 2021. But this phenomenon not only affects elephants in the forests of Central Africa, The process of extraction and reduction is affecting all life in these forests. Trees of all species, animals. This process is actually affecting all life in the whole world. We want timber, we want ivory, we want minerals, we want furs, and we want medicines, because we have realized that we actually need connective medicines, because we feel disconnected, although we're not. Because we have now realized that we are experiencing a collective and global crisis of mental health. It's quite obvious. But this brings us to the question, is then wild iboga already endangered too? Well, the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species lists Tabernante iboga plant as of least concern. So this is good news. However, when we speak to people from the local communities on the ground, they tell us that it's becoming harder to find iboga, and that in some areas, and especially urban areas, the le bois sacré is increasingly difficult to get. And when we speak to people from the international communities, they tell us that over the last 15 years, coinciding with the psychedelic renaissance, the global demand for this plant, well, has exponentially grown. So, what we know for sure is that iboga in the wild is undoubtedly being harvested at a rate never seen before. And we know what has happened to the elephant in that same region only in 10 years. So, in this context, the government of Gabon decided in 2019, 2 years ago, to ban all export of wild iboga from the country. And to date, no export permit has been issued yet. And that is a really important fact. Let's think about it. It means that this medicine that we use in the global north, which basically most of it comes from plants, from Tabernante iboga plants grown in this country, come from illegal poaching and are based on a black market which promotes the unlimited extraction of natural resources. And at this point, when we hear all these things, we might think that also in the face of all these problems and ecological trouble that we're facing, the sixth mass extinction, climate change, and all of this, it's so easy to feel so overwhelmed. Yet, the awakening to interconnectedness with psychedelics might be providing the best opportunity of our lives, the chance to do things differently. So what should we do to protect these medicines? Well, we've been thinking about it, but each case is different, and every medicine requires a different approach. In the case of the iboga, however, there are some proposals to take into account. First of all, if you want to reduce pressure on this plant on the wild and on the forests as a whole, we need to cultivate. And to cultivate in ways that are not harmful for the forest. Agroforestry, permaculture, not monocrops. And this picture shows a community plantation in northeastern Gabon, in Ebieng. This particular plantation is run by Blessings of the Forest, who are also facilitating other community plantations in the country. And they're doing a great job in giving support to these biocultures and to the plant itself. Community plantations such as this one aim to create new sources of income to the communities, and also to providing traceable and quality iboga to the international communities that are concerned by the biological conservation of this medicine. But as I mentioned, as today, the government of Gabon has not yet granted any export permit. So we need to keep looking for alternatives. One alternative is to plant this medicine out of these forests. But there are some examples now, but with plantations that are too small and too new to know if that will have any positive impact on the exploitation, the current exploitation of the forests in Central Africa. Another alternative is to obtain ibogaine for sources other than Tabernante iboga. Currently, this can be done from another plant of the Apocynaceae family called Voacanga africana. And this plant is widely cultivated in other countries of Africa. It grows fast, and it's not in any kind of danger of extinction. So this could be, at this very moment, the best possible alternative to the exploitation of Tabernante iboga in the wild. Another important alternative could be synthetic ibogaine. And although the synthesis of ibogaine was discovered as early as 1966, its large-scale production is very expensive yet. So there are currently several initiatives, like such as 18MC, Tabernante log, which are congeners of ibogaine that promise to have the same anti-addictive effects as ibogaine, but without the psychoactive action. We'll see if this works. In any case, we are here at a very critical moment in which the new psychedelic industry is trying to find solutions to the problems of humanity. But it's trying to do this with technologies that are inspired by traditional knowledge. So, if they are successful, who will benefit? That's a question. What we are actually seeing is that the current race to register patents within the new psychedelic industry is leaving out the old original actors, those which are at the very base of all this knowledge. In this regard, Monsieur Jean-Moïse Muiro, spiritual father of the Misoko Rite, has a message for the international community.
Le message que nous donnions à la communauté internationale du fait que l'existence et l'usage du bois sacré ont pour mission, je dis l'existence de nos rites et l'usage du bois sacré ont pour mission de soulager les maux de l'humanité. Donc le message que nous nous lançons, c'est que l'opinion internationale, que les organisations, que les ONG et l'État gabonais puissent aujourd'hui encadrer le iboga juridiquement, afin que nous soyons également bénéfiques, que nous soyons également mis dans leur fil conducteur pour au moins enfin bénéficier également des produits, des retombées de iboga. Voilà un peu le message que nous lançons auprès de l'international.
And it is precisely to ensure that the indigenous people benefit from their own genetic and cultural resources that in 2010 the Nagoya Protocol on Access and Benefit Sharing was created as a supplementary agreement to the Convention on Biological Diversity. And as we can see in this map, almost all the countries in the world have signed both treaties, or at least one of them. It's everyone in blue, green, and dark gray. All of them but let's accept one. There's a notable exception here, if you can see, United States. Well, it's obvious that there is a profound lack of ethical and even legal coherence in the position of the US, in the international system of patents, and in the distribution of benefits derived from the production of knowledge. And this directly affects the psychedelic industry as a whole, with US-led companies leading the way. Let's see what Dr. Akendenge from the University of Libreville has to say about it.
C'est que, à compter de maintenant, tout travail qui se fera sur l'iboga se fasse dans le cadre du protocole de Nagoya, où justement, où on recommande, où il y a la dimension APA, accès et partage des avantages, c'est-à-dire partout où on ira réaliser des enquêtes, partout où la plante sera cultivée, si maintenant il y a des retombées industrielles ou des transformations, hein, ou pourquoi pas même des phytomédicaments, que nous puissions penser retourner vers ces personnes qui ont livré les informations sur l'iboga et qui ont fourni leurs plantes, parce qu'on dit qu'il y a des cliniques d'iboga dans le monde entier.
What Dr. Akendenge is telling us is that everyone who wants to develop a relationship with iboga, with ibogaine, or with any of all its derivative products, properties, and applications, has to think or has to be based on systems of access and benefit sharing. And this is not something that would affect iboga and its biocultures in Africa. This is something actually we see in other biocultural processes. We see that with the Incilius alvarius, also known, this toad known as Buffon. We see that with peyote and its biocultures. We see that with mushrooms, the sacred little children. And of course, we see that with ayahuasca and all the exploitation of the Amazon. In any case, if there is anything that we have learned from and about the conservation of these medicines, is that as long as these ecosystems where they live exist, these species will have room to regenerate. So in reality, the first big step would be to protect the medicines that we love through protecting and defending the global ecosystems in which they live. That means protecting the forests, the deserts, the lakes, and the rivers which are home to all these animals, fungi, and plants. And we know now that up to 80% of worldwide biodiversity is contained into areas directly managed by indigenous peoples and local communities. Let's think about it, 80% of worldwide biodiversity. So, if indigenous people that still live in their territories have the capacity to ensure the regeneration of biodiversity and life, it must be because they know something that we don't, right? I mean, it shouldn't escape anyone's notice that there's some sort of wisdom in their knowledge systems that our global world is not yet able to comprehend. But what we know and what we see is that under the rule of our knowledge, life dies. And under the rule of their knowledge, life thrives. So I think that we should seriously consider not only sharing part of the economic benefits with these original cultures, but also ensure that their processes, their community processes, are preserved so that they thrive in their territories. And that we also preserve or we help them preserve their knowledge systems so that transmission to new generations is guaranteed. And so here we are, all together, envisioning worlds, future worlds and present worlds in which people take psychedelics, envisioning some worlds based on the unlimited capacity of extraction of natural resources and on the reduction of these medicines into molecules, particles, properties, and applications, and profit, but also envisioning other worlds where we see a deep reconnection and worlds where we ensure the conservation and regeneration of these medicines, of their biocultures, and of the global ecosystems. Because everything is deeply interconnected, and the choices we make with our medicines and our health have impacts on the health of our planet. Thank you for your attention.